he was in his realm. You both know his personality and how evil of a man he was. And, you know, they say only the good die young. Well, he lived a lot longer than I think we all thought. But I was very relieved to hear that, knowing that those hands will never kill again.
This week's episode contains graphic descriptions of the crimes of abortionist Kermit Gosnell, who recently died. Everything you hear on this podcast is true, but some viewers may find the content disturbing.
Hello, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
And welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. This is a very unusual Anne and Phelim Scoop because we had breaking news this week. A lot of you will have potentially have heard this on Monday that we found out, and we broke the news that Kermit Gosnell has died in prison. So the whole of this podcast will be devoted actually to the Gosnell story, which you know we have devoted years to.
Yeah. So let's just remind people who Kermit Gosnell was. He was quite simply America's biggest serial killer. He was a doctor in Philadelphia who was convicted in 2013 of the first-degree murder of 3 infants who were born alive during illegal late-term abortions and then killed by having their spinal cord severed with scissors. He's also found guilty of the killing of 41-year-old Karnamaya Munger, a refugee from Bhutan who died from a lethal dose of anesthesia administered by unlicensed staff in his clinic. She died in a house of horrors that Gosnell ran, where cats walked the corridors and life-saving equipment was broken, severely rusted or non-existent. In Gosnell's 30 years of running his filthy abortion clinic in Philadelphia, it's thought he murdered thousands of babies born alive. The grand jury, which investigated his case, wanted to charge him with 200 recent murders, but the move was stymied and reduced to just 7 after pressure from senior politicians and law enforcement officials who are worried about not being able to claim that crime was declining. They were worried about their falling crime statistics.
The grand jury report, which was published and is available online, and I couldn't recommend it more that you read the full thing, and we'll put a link to it up in the show notes. But they summarized, and they were really, really angry because for so many reasons about this case. Let's just listen. I recorded myself reading parts of it, some of the more powerful parts of it. Here's a summary of the case according to them. Let's listen to that. This case is about a doctor who killed babies and endangered women. What we mean is that he regularly and illegally delivered live, viable babies in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy and then murdered these newborns by severing their spinal cords with scissors. The medical practice by which he carried out this business was a filthy fraud in which he overdosed his patients with dangerous drugs, spread venereal disease among them with infected instruments, perforated their wombs and bowels, and on at least 2 occasions caused their deaths. Over the years, many people came to know that something was going on here, but no one put a stop to it.
Before we go to the interview, we also want to say we wrote a book about the Gosnell case where the information is, it's truly shocking. It's a book. It's
definitely a page turner. And I always say to people that you read a page of it and think, this is the worst thing I've ever read, like the most disturbing thing I've ever read. Then you pull the next page over and the next page is worse.
Yes. And we made a podcast, which is called Serial Killer, a True Crime Podcast. You get to hear Gosnell's voice. We interviewed Gosnell both in prison and over the phone for multiple hours, dozens of hours.
Yeah.
So you get to hear his creepy voice, his pathetic justification.
But you also get to hear Detective Jim Wood, you get to hear Christine Wexler and other people involved in the investigation.
And some of his staff who worked with him in his crime spree. Let's go over now to the interview we did just before we came on air with the true American hero, Detective Jim Wood. Gosnell's crimes were finally uncovered on February the 18th, 2010, when Detective Jim Wood, along with the FBI and DEA, was involved in a raid on his clinic at 3801 Lancaster Avenue. The raid was part of a prescription drugs for sale investigation. When they got there, the investigators found a facility in an appalling condition. And there was blood-splattered floors and chairs, flea-infested cats, cat feces, urine-soaked blankets, rusty, unsterilized instruments. expired medications, and babies' remains stored haphazardly in jars, milk jugs, cat food containers, and freezers. It was initially a drugs investigation, but when Detective Wood saw what was going on in the clinic, he made sure the investigation changed focus, despite some opposition from those who were worried that prosecuting an abortionist was politically unacceptable. Jim Wood is retired and joins us now to discuss the squalid life, crimes, and death of Dr. Kermit Gosnell. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you, Jim. So what was your first reaction when you heard that Dr. Kermit Gosnell had died?
I took a breath of fresh air. He lived a lot longer than his victims, obviously, and it was horrible. So I had expected him to die in prison much earlier, but he was in his realm. You both know his personality and how evil of a man he was. And, you know, they say only the good die young. Well, he lived a lot longer than I think we all thought. But I was very relieved to hear that, knowing that those hands will never kill again.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the hands, because when we met him in the prison, actually, there was a whole thing with him showing his hands, and it was really, really super creepy. But bring us back, Jim. Bring us right back to the beginning here. Where were you working when you first heard the name Kermit Gosnell? What was the circumstances that brought you first into this case?
So I was working in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Narcotics Unit, the Dangerous Drug Offenders Unit. And during those investigations, we start out a lot of times on the lower end, buying small amounts of prescription pills at the time, oxycodone, which was prevalent much more so back then. So we started an investigation buying pills, which ultimately led to Gosnell's clinic, where we found out he was the supplier of the prescriptions that provided probably thousands of people illegal pills. And the first time I heard his name, we were out. I was with Officer Rich Gramlich. I'll never forget where I was. City Avenue, which is in West Philadelphia. We made a phone call to Kathy Taylor, who was one of the persons who obtained prescriptions from Gosnell. And I specifically remember when Officer Gramlich was talking to Kathy Taylor to try to get her to reveal who she was getting the prescriptions from. And I actually recorded that conversation where she basically spells out Gosnell's name, literally. And that's the first time I heard Kermit Gosnell.
Yeah, I remember that. And actually, we in the podcast that we produced about Kermit Gosnell called Serial Killer, we actually play that tape. We might just listen to that right now, because it's pretty extraordinary.
So you guys, was Richie and you, were you undercover at this stage, or did she know you were police officers?
She did not know. Rich Gramlich was the undercover at that time, and she did not know that. He had been introduced to Kathy Taylor from another informant that we obtained. That's the informant who basically revealed not only the Gosnell case, but another very significant case. And basically that informant introduced Officer Gramlich to Kathy Taylor as another buyer of oxycodone.
Yeah.
So that's how.
So let's listen.
We're just going to listen to that tape right now.
Richie's talking to her about prices and amounts of drugs that he wants. And then I'm outside trying to hand signal and try to find out who her doctor is.
Because I wanted to talk about the other thing that we were going to do.
Oh, yeah, when you want to do it? Because I'm going to leave in a couple weeks.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I'm just trying to figure out why it's there for the savings on it.
No. I'm talking about if you take me into your doctor, how do I know it's going to be a definite?
Right.
What if I go in there and I see him and then all of a sudden he's like, nah, I ain't giving them to you. What do you think that's going to happen? Because I don't want to waste my money.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you know tomorrow, all right?
Okay, that's cool. And then the other thing was, my buddies are going to this guy in South Philly, and then my people are only getting Vicodin from him. I don't want to go there and get Vicodin. I'm here for oxys, and I don't want to waste my time with it.
So long as they tell you where to take it.
Okay.
And you get there before the store run out.
All right,
And you do.
who are you taking me to so I know? You know what I mean? Like,
You talking about what doctor?
yeah.
I told you about Gosnell.
Who?
Dr. Gosnell.
Dr. Darnell?
Gosnell. Gosnell.
Okay, so we've heard it. We've just played that, Jim, and everyone will get to hear that. And it's just, as you say, it's incredible because it's like Gosnell. It's just incredible. So from that initial drug case, how quickly did it turn into something else?
It was a slow process, believe it or not. These types of investigations, even though the pills were coming from Gosnell's office, we weren't aware of how the operation was being conducted that led to Gosnell. So we first had to follow up with numerous buys. We did numerous buys from Kathy Taylor. And of course, you know that Kathy Taylor ended up having to go to jail in Delaware County on a state parole violation. And so we used Richie to get Kathy Taylor to introduce him to Tarina Johnson, who was another woman.
Just let me interrupt there, Jim. So what happened was your inside source, things were going well, you were doing the buys, and then some other arm of the state said,
no, we're picking her up.
We're picking her up and took your prize informant or insider
and locked her up.
Is that right?
Yes. Oh. And during that time, we had been following them as well. Like after we would make a buy and prior to the buy, we would set up surveillance. That's part of the investigation process. And the one time we're down in Center City, I think I told you guys this time before, we were following Kathy Taylor and Tarina Johnson, who were together looking to get a script down in Center City. And they were, I think Kathy was driving and she's driving erratically. It looked like they were arguing with each other, having a domestic dispute. And it was just amazing to watch. But ultimately, Kathy Taylor introduced Officer Gramlich to Tarina Johnson. And we started getting up the ladder that way. Still not sure if the one thing is Jason Huff had information, and I think we had information from the DEA that Gosnell's prescription drug monitoring showed he was one of the highest prescribers of oxycodone.
And actually, Jason Huff, you mentioned Jason Huff, of course, was one of the people in the investigation with you from the FBI, and he was a young guy at the time, and there ended up being the three of you, right? There was the DEA guy, there was you, and there was Jason Huff, and you became the three amigos who really pushed forward this case. Moving forward from the drug thing, which is actually, by the way, completely fascinating, but moving forward from that, I think there was a moment where this changed, really dramatically changed from being a drug investigation to being something a lot more serious. Can you tell us about that moment?
Yes, sir. So what we did to further the investigation, which is what we always do, and you put it in the movie beautifully, we flipped another informant, and basically it led us to the office worker, Latasha Lewis, who was caught basically being part of this scam. So we took her aside, and she fessed up right away and described the conditions inside the facility, described a lot of things that had gone on that we found, unbelievable. And, until you actually see it with your own eyes, we just listened to it and took the statement from Latasha because she had, I think, 2 children to worry about. And she explained why she was, doing what she did. She literally seemed honest enough. And even though she knew what she was doing was wrong by taking the money for the prescriptions, she was able to give us the first insight into how bad he was. And ultimately, she told us one major significant thing about Karnamaya Mangar.
Yes.
And
yes,
that's what took me by big surprise, because I was a police officer in Philadelphia, handled hospital cases before where we would get information from a complainant or a victim, even, something that wasn't a domestic or criminal, but we would show up at a hospital scene. And I tried to find a report. I asked Latasha the description of the woman that she said had died in November of 2009. During this time, we had been making buys I think from the beginning of 2009 through the summer into even past November. And by the time we got to November, the information from Latasha was dead on.
Thank you for the nice compliment about the movie. And I know Jim was on the set of the movie a few times and became a big friend of Dean Cain, who played him brilliantly. Let's watch the scene that Jim is just describing that we had in the movie, where Latasha sort of does this thing, which I can remember distinctly when we talked to you back in the day, Jim, where you said she got up and she actually wrote on a whiteboard, like, and explained things to you. And then she mentions, of course, the fact that a woman died, and you'll see Dean Cain playing Jim Wood, reacting to that. Let's just watch that now.
Seekers.
Yeah, see, we got three. He got three kind of customers at the clinic. The seekers, they the ones come in for the drugs. Oxy, sometimes Xanax, Percocet. And you got the procedures. And they gotta get their pain meds to get ready for the abortions when the doctor comes in. 'Cause see, he don't even get them most days till like 7 o'clock at night or so.
So you use the Smurfs to get the IDs for the scripts, right? And then the seekers...
Who's giving the abortion patients their meds?
What's that got to do with anything?
Well, if there's no doctor there, who's doling out the pain meds?
Any of us. Allison, Lydia, Betty sometimes.
Excuse me. Can we finish
Betty
the
been there since she
conversation
was
about the
15.
narcotics operation?
And Lydia was there when that one woman died.
Wait, a woman died?
So you got interested in that and you checked, and there was no official record, which is highly unusual, of this unusual death. There was no case number or anything like that. You phoned the coroner's office, and I think the response was, I was waiting for someone to call about this death.
Yes.
Like, why was that? Because that was a curious thing for him to say. What was that?
Because of the circumstances of the death investigation report and the toxicology report.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was clear that anesthesia was being administered by unqualified people. It was clear from Latasha's, not evidence, but accounts, that there was severely illegal activity going on. The babies were being killed after birth. But that was one person's account of that. So then there was a raid. And it was really a joint raid. It was a raid both for the drugs, but also you were there, I suppose, for the drugs as well. But you also had an interest, and I was on the warrant too, that you wanted to find evidence of illegality on the abortion side as well. Is that correct?
Not really at that time, the abortion side, although that wasn't something that was out of our mind at that time. The main focus was on the drugs and the information that the only real information that we had was from Tarina Johnson, who had limited involvement with the people working behind the desk. And then Latasha Lewis was phenomenal as a witness and an informant, because she, with the information provided, gave us insight, but not really as much as, and I don't know whether she was trying to withhold some of the things that she had been involved with because she knew was inherently wrong. But the main focus at that time for my investigation was the death of Karnamaya Mangar. And
yes, I think that's important to mention, that was actually very much, the raid was very much about the drugs, but you were very interested in finding out more information about what had happened to Karnamaya Mangar. And I always remember Christine Wexler, who was the assistant district attorney on the case. And I have that quote in the book. There's a quote in there when we start talking about you, where Christine Wexler said, you know, this whole case is about Jim Wood. And Jim Wood was Karnamaya Mangar's champion. He was the only one. This woman had died. She was a Bhutanese refugee. She had died after a botched abortion at Kermit Gosnell's clinic. And she was dead and buried, and no one cared until you turned up and found out and got justice for Karnamaya Mangar. I think that's really important to say at this point.
So describe the raid first. Describe the clinic.
What was that like that night?
Give us your first impressions of Kermit Gosnell's, as the grand jury later called it, House of Horrors. But, you know, I believe there was a smell, there was sight.
But it starts actually in the car park, right? Because he drove up and you guys were all waiting. So tell us from the point of the car park what happened.
Well, he had left the Delaware facility, and there were agents following him from Delaware towards the clinic. And we weren't sure whether he was going to go right to the clinic or whether he was going to go to his house, which wasn't that much further away. He did go to the clinic, and that was the time we decided to approach him. And first impressions, he was on the phone, obviously, we believe, talking to Pearl. And
his wife.
We were explaining our presence here. It was Lieutenant McConnell, my lieutenant, who I worked for at the time, the Dangerous Drug Offenders Unit, and other detectives. And the interaction, even before we got into the office, was unbelievable because it didn't seem like he cared what the reason was that we were approaching him. Even after I told him we have a search warrant for his clinic and the house, he was more interested in bringing a bag of clams into the clinic and feeding his turtles. Because I said, "What do you need the clams for?" And he said, "To feed my turtles." And right then and there, that was the start of the Twilight Zone, which I always refer to.
Yes.
Is why even a legitimate doctor or anybody, not even a doctor, but would that they react that way to police officers telling them that they have a search warrant for their premises.
Yes, the FBI are here. And,
the FBI are here. The district attorney's office
the
is here.
DEA.
The DEA is here. Oh, listen, hang on. I need to feed my turtles.
My illegal turtles.
My illegal turtles. Yeah, he had this inside the clinic. He had this like huge vat where he had these turtles that needed to be fed. And so what happens? You walk in with him, right? And he's got the food for the turtles.
So he not only asked if he could bring his bags and his lunch in, which we all know what that was, but he asked to bring the turtle food in. And we're like, yes, you're not under arrest. We're going to, execute the search warrant and talk to you about what's going on. And so we entered the side door. Phelim, I think you were with me when we entered the building before, and through that side entrance where he would always go. And he placed his items down, his briefcase, I believe, and his and the lunch. And he walked to a refrigerator, and I think he put the bag of clams in the refrigerator and then came out with 2 clams. And that's when he walked over to the tank where the turtles were and just leaned over the tank and smashed them together with his hands, his bare hands. Like you said, Ann, his big bare hands, and emptied all the contents into the turtle tank. Again, if you could take bullet points of every crazy thing that he did, there'd be a million of them.
Exactly. The problem with making a movie about this case was there was things that Gosnell did that were so crazy that we were worried that people wouldn't believe him, that we were exaggerating. And in fact, many of the craziest things he did, we didn't put in the movie because it was unbelievable. It was, as you say, it was the Twilight Zone.
And it didn't stop there.
So you walk into the clinic. I mean, just remembering that whole night, and I know it went on for a long time, and I think you came back the following day. Walk us through what was the smell, what was the look, what did you see? What was, let's just put it this way, what was unusual for a medical facility, Jim?
Well, like I said before, I had never been in an abortion facility. Doctor's office to me is a place, even where they do procedures, it's clean smelling. It looks clean. There's organization there. This had none of it. As soon as you saw the floors and the equipment and the smell was horrible, like a mix of formaldehyde and marijuana and death, which I refer to that smell too, because not far from where on that floor and subsequent floors, there you could almost know there was multiple killings of babies. And, of course, that's where Karnamaya Mangar died. got a heartbeat when they got her to the hospital, but she really died at that clinic. And it was a combination of those chemicals and everything together, and to combine that with the, I don't even want to say uncleanliness because that's too nice of a word, just dirty facility with untrained workers there. The combination.
One of the extraordinary things that I have such a clear memory of, and I know it's I'm not sure. Funny enough, I think this isn't in the film actually, but you asked about Carnamaya Monger, and I believe if my memory serves me correctly, Gosnell actually had kept Carnamaya Monger's baby's remains in the fridge and brought you to see that. Is that correct?
And labeled them.
Can you remind me about that?
Yes. So as we talked about before, not knowing too much about the abortions and whether they were legal or not. And I think this is really important for the case, because if we would have just gone in there, and search warrants are specific to what you can take. So I didn't have listed in the items to be requested fetal remains at that point. That's why we ended up going back and getting a consent to search and to go back to recover the fetal remains in the freezer. After interviewing all the victims who were, some were taken to the hospital that night, and then the workers who gave him right up. The following night we went back, and that's when we were going to recover the evidence related to the fetal remains in the freezer. And while doing so, Gosnell was right there, and he pointed to the bag. It's so vivid in my mind because the clear bag with the Carnamaya Monger's baby in that bag had the initials KM on it. And he said, "This is Carnamaya Monger's fetus." And I, again, another bullet point, check mark. This guy must be crazy. He supposedly did that abortion in November of 2009, and here we're at February 2010. And right instantly, I thought this must be his trophy that he's kept there.
Okay, and talking of trophies, and we're going to watch this
trophies by serial killers.
Trophies by serial killers. But talking of that very issue, because actually, again, we've depicted this in the film, and we're going to show that clip in a moment. But you then, at one point, I think on the initial night, you made quite an extraordinary discovery of jars. Can you tell us about that? And then we'll watch that clip. But let's hear your description first.
Yeah, so going through the facility after seeing the blood on the floors and the walls and the equipment and the rusted out equipment and the gurneys that were just dirty and the oxygen tanks that looked like they were expired, I opened a cabinet in one of the, not the procedure room, but offset of the procedure room where there were other pads, gauze pads, and I saw containers with green lids with little feet in them, multiple containers, 20 to 30, I believe, at least.
We're showing that picture right now from evidence, actually, from the FBI that took photographs that night as well, so people can see that photograph. But let's just watch the scene.
Well, yeah, just be clear, like these are babies' feet in jars, and they're labelled with the names. I mean, sometimes you watch movies and they say, serial killers keep trophies, and you never, you're always, is this something that they do for the movies? Because it all sounds very dramatic, but this is an actual serial killer who kept the most bizarre trophies of all, and they were nicely, neatly labelled and stored away.
Let's watch. We're gonna play that clip right now with Dean Cain again playing the role of Detective Jim Wood in what actually happened. Let's watch that now.
Hey, Woody. Hey, man, you got to see this.
Why?
Hey, man, is this normal?
I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before.
Yeah, so I mean, extraordinary, and I know from obviously we wrote the book and we made the movie and stuff, and I do know that part of all of this, which was really extraordinary work, an extraordinary thing to have to do. I know some of the people, because as Phelim said, on those jars, and people can kind of see it. We're not going to show it obviously here, but there were names of the people, of the mothers of those children who had those feet, and I know that people got in touch. That the police had to get in touch and let people know, by the way, we have your, the feet, whatever. And I know even one woman who wrote to me, there was so many stories connected with this, and I know you and I have talked about this many times, Jim, but I remember one woman who was a grandmother to a little person whose feet were in those jars. I remember her writing and being very, very grateful for the work that we did and for, and for letting her know. And I think there was some effort for people to get those remains back and have some kind of a burial. But
the raid got more and more bizarre. It was very obvious that this was a crazy charnel house at this stage. But Gosnell was in the middle of an abortion, in the middle of the process there that night, and he was allowed to continue with the abortion. I mean, I know that you tried to object, but
it's interesting. I think the details of that are worth rehearsing, because the Department of Health had sent some representatives there, and obviously they took the lead. You objected. I think maybe Jason Huff objected. I know that there was an objection from the authorities, from the police and all of that. But the Department of Health said, no, you have to let him go ahead, which I must have been really tough.
But the person who was from the Department of Health was the person who cleared him from previous allegations of wrongdoing. So they had a sort of a self-interest not to admit what was in front of their eyes. Are we correct, Jim?
Yes, absolutely.
And then he came out of that procedure and remind us of what happened there, because it is pretty extraordinary.
So to preface that, remember when we approached him, he was still outside just getting to work. But the way he would do his procedures is get the women to precipitate and get ready to give birth. So his procedures, he had 8 or 9 women in the facility that night. One way or the other, he was doing these procedures, but he had to have them prepared. So when he got there, I don't know what the circumstances were, why this woman was in trouble, but we had called rescue for the other women that were also in need of services. So I believe the request was made by the Department of Health nurses, and he was allowed to go, again, beyond our, allowance. Authority. And I think it was the FBI working supervisor that night. I don't think he was the actual supervisor, but he was an acting supervisor, allowed Gosnell to finish whatever was happening there. And the nurses, that I believe that was based on the nurses' assertion of the emergency. But again, we were just in the beginning of these investigations. So it was definitely against mine and Jason's better judgment to let him do anything. However, he wasn't under arrest. That was out of our hands, and then he was allowed to do that procedure.
And my memory, if I'm correct, he did come out.
I think your memory's correct, because you wouldn't forget this.
I don't think I'd forget this. What happened then, Jim? Over to you to describe what happened then when he came out.
Well, when we talked about him bringing his lunch in that day, he came out with gloves that were bloody and ripped and asked if he could eat. And he proceeded to eat his salmon in front of us with bloody hands, no washing, no anything. And I think it was teriyaki salmon. And I think Jason said he could never eat teriyaki salmon again in his life.
It's in the book. I have such a clear memory of that, because it was just, and Jason said, I'm never eating teriyaki salmon again.
And this is a hardened FBI officer who'd seen a lot, but when he saw him eat the teriyaki salmon with the bloody hands or bloody gloves, was it? I can't remember. And the gloves had holes in them anyway. He said, that's me and teriyaki salmon finished. So then
Unbelievable.
Go ahead.
But not really. As you adding all these things up, from the very beginning. I mean, I hate to say I was getting hardened to it, because of course during your law enforcement career you see very many horrible things, and we were this was just again, you talk about people not believing that and made up for the movie, but that was definitely not made up. That happened.
Yeah. No, extraordinary.
So you then interviewed Gosnell. He wasn't under arrest, but he started talking. Tell us what.
But I think the context of that I think is very important is that, Jim, that you had separated in the night. You and Jason and the other investigators separated the women who worked there and put them in rooms. And as you said, they immediately started spilling the beans. They were like, they're going to tell the whole truth about what they knew. And so you started to get all this information that was pretty extraordinary. So you started to put that stuff to Gosnell. And I think that was, you had a lot of very good information when you started questioning him in the clinic, right?
Yes. And what happened, if you can't even understand the craziness of, because there was law enforcement in there from 3 or 4 different agencies. There was patients in there. There were workers in there. So the chaos in the very beginning was super crazy. And after him feeding his turtles, after that incident with the woman, him eating his lunch, when things finally settled down, yes, our goal was to separate and assign detectives to speak with the workers to get their stories. And our goal, myself, Jason, and Steve Doherty, who's with DEA Diversion, wanted to talk to Gosnell about the drug practices and the death of Karnamaya Mangar, and some of the other allegations made by Latasha Lewis, who obviously Gosnell didn't know. She was the first strong informant. But yes, as the other information came from the other women, it was tremendous information to have to go at him, especially someone who, and you've both spoken with him, how arrogant and narcissistic he was, thinking that he could answer any question.
Yeah.
And so,
and he can, by the way, I want to say we met him. I mean, we have many things to say. He does have an answer for everything, and he's very affable, very charming, but it's charming in a smarmy way. But when you know the case as well as we did, and you're able to answer his questions, and I think the same thing happened to you, his demeanor changes. So tell us about his personality there. And I think you threw in a couple of...
I think my memory is that he was quite relaxed and kind of almost jovial chatting to you until you hit him with a couple of things where he suddenly realized,
they know more.
They know more than, they know stuff. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, I think Steve and Jason wanted to go through the drug stuff first with him. And that's what they did. They talked about prescriptions and how many he was writing and who he was writing for. He listed patients that we knew were getting multiple prescription from several patients. And I think we called those people the sponsors. And the sponsors would go pay whatever fee it was for the initial patient. And that's where Gosnell was making his money. The sponsor would bring like 10, 15 patients, each bringing $100 or so for the patient visit. And then Gosnell would write a script for all 10, 15 of those patients and give it to the sponsor. That's when the sponsors would go out and distribute them on the street. So Jason had a whole list together. He did a great job organizing that. And basically, Gosnell admitted to that. He wasn't... in an earlier recorded conversation with Latasha Lewis, I think you quoted that too, is the people in these hard times need this as a lifeline. And he didn't mean they needed the opioid medication. He meant they needed the drugs so they could sell them and, make money so they could survive.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
He's such a humanitarian.
He was such a humanitarian, that he was really caring about these poor people. And this is how they make a living. They're selling drugs on the street. And, it's understandable and times are rough, and this is a living.
Yes.
so that was one. So he basically, they got what they wanted from theirs and mine at that time. Obviously, I was involved in the whole case as they were, but the death of Kornemeier Mongar, I wanted to know who gave her the medicine, and we knew that Linda Williams had distributed the medicine based on his order, because he wasn't at the clinic when that happened. And that's one of the things Latasha said. And that's one of the things I think Linda had informed us that night when we spoke to her. Again, we received so much information that night from the other workers there that just corroborated a lot of the stuff Latasha had known. And then finally, what you're talking about, his demeanor changed, is we also received information when we found out the way he was making his abortions look within the 24-week Pennsylvania limit, he was adjusting the ultrasound wand. And the ultrasound wand, he did it in a way that would make the baby's head look like it was within 24 weeks. And that would go into the file. Oh, and the 24 weeks, I asked him if he would do abortions past 24 weeks. And he agreed. He said about, I think, 10 to 20%. And right there, he gives himself up, because you're not supposed to do that. So, but he thought he could explain that away. He thought he could explain the drug stuff away. He thought he could explain, but the one thing he couldn't explain is the thing about the ultrasound wand. Like, why would you do that? And that's when his face turned like an ashen white, and he dipped his head, and he just thought, I could still see him just sitting there trying to compose himself, which he actually did a pretty good job, because then he started talking about the abortion doctor in, what was it, Colorado?
Kansas.
Or Kansas.
George
Tiller was his friend. And so he tried to deflect at that point in time but he knew at that time, you're exactly right. He knew that people were talking.
You got him.
And we got him. So.
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, just bring us forward then. I mean, obviously there was an enormous amount. I know you went to the clinic a number of times and collected evidence. And then there came a moment, obviously, when, together with the DA's office, that you got, and everyone decided that because of your role in this, that even though your job at the time was in the drug section
World
of the district attorney's office, they literally made an exception. Everyone decided, you know what? This guy's going to get picked up for murdering babies who had been born full term and then had their necks cut with scissors in third trimester abortions. They weren't abortions, but everyone decided Jim Wood should be the guy to put the cuffs on, and you got to do that. Tell us about that day.
So what happened in the very beginning? I mean, it was very difficult to figure out how this case was going to be prosecuted, because Jason wanted to further the federal investigation based on the files that ended up missing, and he did a federal search warrant for those. And it got up, again, political things happen in places, and don't want to get into the details, but he was kind of shut down. And that way it bounced back to the Philly District Attorney's Office. And again, Christine Wexler and Joanne Pescator put together a grand jury that laid out the case. And this is what gave me confidence back in the world, basically, especially Philadelphia, because those people were incensed. They couldn't believe, just like we couldn't believe what we saw at the clinic, what he was doing. They couldn't believe it, and they were pissed off. They didn't like what was going on. And so they came out with an indictment. And what was happening, and again, this wasn't just me, and I say it all the time. It's the FBI, the DEA, Philadelphia homicide. Jack McDermott, Carlos, and all those guys did a great job. Follow-up interviews, and it became a great collaborative investigation. And ultimately, during those times, though, the news would come out because it was leaking information to them that they were going to serve a search warrant. And the district attorney's office had no choice but to shut pretty much everything down as far as who knew what. We basically had enough based on the grand jury's recommendations at that point. And that's why they're like, look, Detective Wood was in this from the beginning. I wasn't a homicide detective, but it wasn't like I couldn't have been a homicide. It just happened that I worked drug work my whole career. And, I ended up, thankfully, being the one who swore out the arrest warrants, the 10 individuals that we arrested. And I think we talked about that before. I don't think this was in the movie, but down, once. So just so your viewers understand, the district attorney's office is a separate entity than the Philadelphia Police Department.
Sure.
I was a Philadelphia detective detailed to the district attorney's office. We work hand in hand with each other, but that being said, it was a different type of investigation. I wasn't down in the homicide unit working with those guys. So why not?
So I mean, there's so much, and things keep coming back to me. Like his house, for example, where you arrested him, his house was like an episode from Hoarders. You and Christina went into maybe it was Christina went into the cellar to look for things and noticed the bottom of their hazmat suit getting black.
Oh yeah, from the bottom up.
And it was fleas and insects infested, like literally getting black. And then what you found, over 200,000, 250,000 in cash
in the kid's bedroom. In the kid's bedroom.
I mean, listen, there's so much.
And then there was the dead cat, right, in the cellar that was vibrating because it was full of maggots, right?
Yeah, and that all happened. So that the search warrant for the house that night was crucial because he was taking files home, from what we heard. That's why I was able to get the search warrant. They didn't get a search warrant federally for the house because we didn't have any indication that he was taking the money back to the house. From the, you know what, you need a lot of probable cause to make search warrants. Stand up. And what we did have, though, is the information that he was taking files home. So in looking for those files, we came across the same night, the first initial night, we came across that cache, and literally his daughter's bedroom had a hole in the roof and water was coming in. She was wearing a raincoat over her head. Again, people would not believe this. They'd think it was just made up, but it wasn't. And I had limited time over there the first night because I was still back at the other property, the office, collecting evidence. But I had time to go back. We went back, and that's when I filmed, and Gosnell played his piano for us.
I'd forgotten that.
He played the piano.
That's right. He played the piano while you were
and I got it on video.
The search. And you had a video of it. Yes, I remember the video.
Yes. So listen, the horrors just come back. But let's go forward now to the court case. He was charged with 7. I mean, I understand it wasn't you who told me, but that the grand jury wanted to charge him with hundreds of murders. But certain political sources didn't want it to go any further than a small amount because they didn't want to spike the homicide statistics. But he was charged with 7 or 8. Then 1 was dropped. But the court case happened. You were there. Were you there for all the court case?
Most of it, yes.
Yeah.
I that was at the time I had retired from Philadelphia, and I was a Montgomery County detective, and they allowed me to come down and attend the trial. And I testified at the trial. One of the things I testified to was very limited, but the fact, because Jack McMahon tried to get me on and off as quick, and he kind of, in his questioning, well, he was cooperative, right? And I almost went with it, and then I caught myself like, no, he wasn't cooperative when he didn't have an explanation on why.
Yeah, when he was cornered. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
can I just say, it's kind of off topic, but Jack McMahon was a great defender for Gosnell. I was there in the courtroom too, and I'll tell you, there was no point. He wasn't sitting there. It was a pretty hard case to defend, but I'll tell you, every point.
Great lawyer.
Nobody got away with anything.
Yeah.
He was a great lawyer for Gosnell.
Yeah.
And he almost got you kind of going along with the story there. So then the case, I think, you probably, this is not your bailiwick, but the big thing that came out of the case was the lack of media coverage, the lack of national media coverage. Here we had a serial killer about a topic that's of national and international importance. It had selling opioids, a big national and international
A huge
story.
indictment of the Department of Health, who hadn't inspected in 17 years, despite 2 women dying. There was plenty of newsworthy items here.
And you could attack a Republican governor, Tom Ridge, who was the pro-choice governor, who said hands off, which is what the grand jury report. But the mainstream media refused to cover it. And it was, I call it Twitter shaming, but I suppose it was the first Twitter storm where Gosnell's name trended for days and weeks until eventually the media were shamed into covering it. And then and
it literally, the day that they all turned up was the day of the Boston bombing. So quickly as they turned up, they disappeared.
Yes.
Yes. But they did turn up. They did eventually turn up, and it was which was something. But their behaviour was despicable, and they defended themselves. Many of them defended themselves and said it's because they didn't want to say anything negative about abortion.
Well, also remember it's a local crime story, and it's like, all right, so it's George Floyd
from the Washington Post.
Yeah, George Floyd, a local crime story.
Trayvon Martin, local.
Yes.
Yep.
So he was convicted. I mean, did you have any doubt that he would ever be convicted?
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, the one thing about the grand jury hearing all that evidence. Now, one thing to get an indictment, because they say you can indict a bologna sandwich, right? But I knew how much evidence that we had on him, and I knew how many witnesses the prosecution was going to use, and they were going to be believable. But to say that I knew, I couldn't wait for that first guilty, and then that was it. I mean, that's all we needed, because we knew he would never see the light of day again.
I think it's important. I think at this point it's important, just in telling the story to people, for people to realize, the people, that were at the very center of this case, and the victims at the very center of this case. We're just going to play a short clip now from the grand jury testimony, the grand jury report, describing baby boy A, baby boy B and C, and the Sunday babies, just so that people get a sense of what was at the very center of this story. Let's watch that now.
And this is you reading the grand.
This is me reading from the grand jury report exactly what they said, and it'll give you a sense of how they felt about all of this. Over the years, there were hundreds of snippings. Most of these acts cannot be prosecuted, because Gosnell destroyed the files. Among the relatively few cases that could be specifically documented, one was baby boy A. His 17-year-old mother was almost 30 weeks pregnant, 7.5 months, when labour was induced. An employee estimated his birth weight as approaching 6 pounds. He was breathing and moving when Dr. Gosnell severed his spine and put the body in a plastic shoebox for disposal. The doctor joked that this baby was so big he could walk me to the bus stop. Another baby, baby boy B, whose body was found at the clinic frozen in a 1-gallon spring water bottle, was at least 28 weeks of gestational age when he was killed. Baby C was moving and breathing for 20 minutes before an assistant came in and cut the spinal cord, just the way she had seen Gosnell do it so many times. And these were not even the worst cases. Gosnell made little effort to hide his illegal abortion practice, but there were some, the really big ones, that even he was afraid to perform in front of others. These abortions were scheduled for Sundays, a day when the clinic was closed and none of the regular employees were present. Only one person was allowed to assist with these special cases, Gosnell's wife. The files for these patients, who were not kept at the office, Gosnell took them home with him and disposed of them. We may never know the details of these cases. We do know, however, that during the rest of the week, Gosnell routinely aborted and killed babies in the 6th and 7th month of pregnancy. The Sunday babies must have been bigger still. And I actually get very emotional reading that because obviously it was really tough. It was really tough stuff.
So he was convicted. He served he was serving 3 life sentences. He got a further life sentence, I think, for dealing drugs. When it came to sentencing, he did a deal where he said, I won't appeal this judgment I won't appeal the verdict if you take the death penalty off the table. They took the death penalty off the table and he immediately appealed the verdict. Who knows? You can't trust a narcissistic serial killer.
Yes.
To keep his word. Do you think justice was served, or do you think he should have faced the death penalty, or what? Have you any thoughts on that?
I don't think. I mean, the death penalty, based on my religion, I think and I was just discussing this with someone about, it would have probably been easier if he was killed and faced the death penalty, because he had to suffer as a narcissist in prison for all those years and think to himself, what could I have done? And I don't mean in a remorseful way either. What could I have done differently not to have gotten caught? Yeah. I think that's more torture for him than being put to death. I think being put to death, that would have let him off the hook quicker and let God deal with the circumstances after that. But having to live with himself, knowing that he screwed up and he wasn't the smartest man in the room, that was torture for him. So I think that was better to happen that way than it did.
I remember he talked about his son. I mean, the guy wasn't young, right? He was in his 70s, I think, when he was arrested.
73.
73. So his son apparently told him, Dad, you need to retire. Mm-hmm. But, the money, apparently, I remember he's on a phone call saying, for the first time in my life, I'm making real money.
Yeah, I remember that.
He was just so greedy. He owned 17 properties. You're right. He could have done so much, especially in where, hands-off abortion doctors mentality. He could have skirted away from this, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. And that would have haunted him. I mean, he did, we interviewed him obviously in Huntington, and he appeared to be affable. Oh, I have so many friends here. I'm in a band.
I just was very sad that he wasn't in the poetry class. He was very disappointed about that.
Yes. He was reading the Quran.
He was reading the Quran in 3 different translations. And I have such a clear memory of him at the end saying, would we buy him treats? Because we met him I always thought it would be like in the movies where we'd be in a very, closed in environment with the glass in front of us. No, he was sitting in a very open space.
A bit like you and me here.
Basically he pushed his chair right in on top of me, basically, and,
yes.
And invaded my personal space. But he basically wanted treats to be bought from him. There was like a vending machine and you could buy cheese. And I think we did buy him cheese because I think we wanted to interview him again. So we wanted to keep him sweet.
He kept touching your leg as well.
Yeah, he kept touching my leg. And every time he touched my leg, he'd say, oh, I'm sorry about that. And I thought he's doing it quite intentionally, knowing that it's kind of like a control thing. But one clip that I wanted to play from the movie, actually, because I think you hinted at it earlier, that the grand jury were really pissed off. The grand jury were really angry. And their report is amazing. And actually, we'll put it in the show notes because people should read it. It's absolutely amazing to read it. It's a bit of a page turner, a bit like our book, by the way, which is just unbelievable because the contents are just so shocking. But one of the moments that I think, and I remember Christine Wexler talked about this, that in the grand jury, she had somebody from the Department of Health who was questioned about how was it possible that the clinic wasn't inspected for 17 years. We're going to just watch that clip right now.
You are an inspector for the Department of Health, correct?
Correct.
When was the last time your division inspected Dr. Gosnell's clinic?
1993. And then when the FBI raided the place.
17 years between inspections.
We were told not to do any inspections unless we received complaints.
And you received no complaints about Gosnell? Can you tell me what these are? I'll tell you what they are. They're complaints. Why didn't you do an inspection?
We had instructions directly from Governor Ridge's office not to inspect abortion clinics.
Why?
It would hamper women from exercising their reproductive rights.
Are you aware that a woman, Karna Maya Monger, died of complications from an abortion at Gosnell's clinic?
I believe so, yes.
Is it true the DOH requires nail salons to be inspected at least once a year?
Yes.
If someone had died in a nail salon, would you have inspected it then?
Look, accidents happen during medical procedures. People die.
And what I remember from that clip is Christine saying she was incensed when the Department of Health woman said, people die. And we were very clear about making sure that was in the movie, because it's pretty extraordinary, the idea that, and the grand jury talk about it. They said, they closed down nail salons because they found some dust in a corner. And here you had this clinic in West Philadelphia. 2 women died and nothing happened until you turned up, Jim. There were multiple complaints over years, extremely serious complaints, including a doctor, by the way, who hand-delivered a complaint, and nothing happened until you turned up. So we're really extremely grateful for what you did. I always say to people, and I think I said it to somebody this morning, because people have been writing, everyone's been writing to us since we got word of his death. I said, the one thing that I always think about with this is that even though this story is just the worst thing ever and pure evil and frightening, and it terrified me at the time when I was writing the book. I knelt down beside the computer at one stage because it was so terrifying and so evil. But in the middle of all of that, I get to meet you. We get to meet Jim, we got to meet Christine, we got to meet really great people that, restored our faith. And I do remember another quick thought was when we left the prison in Huntington, when we had interviewed him, and we went in the car, I can remember it very well. We played music in the car that our friend Boris Zelkin, who wrote the music for the movie, he had sent us music to play. We didn't even speak to each other in the car. We were both super shook up, but we drove straight from Huntington to a restaurant in Philadelphia to meet you.
Yeah.
And we walked in and we're like, my God, we just came from the prison. And you said, you just were in the presence of pure evil. And it was literally like the presence of pure evil, and then to meet you, the presence of pure goodness.
And I just want to say something. Sorry, Jim, we're doing all the talking here. We're supposed to be interviewing you.
Yes.
But there's a lot to talk about. And I was writing to somebody this morning, and the word evil is used a lot nowadays. Trump's evil, and Pelosi's evil, and this person's evil, and that person's evil. There are very few evil people in the world. There's very few evil organizations in the world. And as a journalist, I don't like using the word evil because it's a subjective term. It's not objective. And it's often your opinion, and it's often comes from your own biases. However, I am confident to use the word evil about Kermit Gosnell. There's a wire loose there. There's something wrong.
Even worse than a wire loose, though. I think that's doing him a favor. I think he chose this. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, go on.
Absolutely, he did. And the scarier part, Phelim, is what I was thinking about what you said, Ann, about the reaction from the nurse on the stand. Remember when I was in the clinic, and that nurse said to me after I said, I can't believe this place looks that way. And she had said, what are you talking about? You're just saying that because you're a police officer. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm saying that because I'm a human being. That really happened. How people like you trust. She's a nurse that's probably taking care of so many patients, and she's looking at that abortion clinic as normal. Again, she's just one of those. And so there's other people out there that think that's okay, and it's not. And I agree with you, Phelim. He's absolutely one of those people that you could refer to as evil. And I understand, this person's evil, that person, that's somebody's opinion. But I think everybody would agree that this guy was really super evil.
Yeah. Well, I think, Jim,
we could talk all day.
You could talk all day. You gave us a statement earlier about Gosnell that we sent out to people, that his victims, he never gave it, you said, may God have mercy on his soul, I think, but his victims got no mercy. What is there anything you'd like to say?
What are your final thoughts on Gosnell?
On his victims?
I'm just glad he's gone. I just hope that this story, as you guys have done a stupendous job. I mean, like, nobody has been a bigger proponent of pro-life by exposing the true facts. And I think from what I remember is you guys weren't even involved in anything like that. It just came about, as so many other people have throughout, that you've talked to, that I've talked to, that just take it for granted that this is a normal process. And look, being one of 12 children, I know where I always stood based on my religion and my upbringing. This is a free country. People can do what they want. But I would say that, there's probably other Kermit Gosnells out there, because of the amount of money that is made from this process. Again, you could go on for days and days and years, which they have been talking about this issue, but you can't. And I think that's why they wanted to hush him up. And I think his death, that's why it's not being reported. And I think that's why, because anybody else, let's just say Joe Smith was in prison, but he was a famous actor, or he was infamous for something. Don't you think the media would have reported it, or even the prison system would have reported it? So and I checked, I kept checking, and I thought, when something happens to a defendant that you arrest, there's certain rights that a detective, because of their, we could be harmed when people get out of jail. They could be released and come after you. I mean, there's several rights that, mostly victims have of someone like Gosnell, but where, and I still have the brain of a detective. I tried very hard. Now, I'm sure something will come out and someone will, get to the bottom of it. But, you guys know, I did find out a lot of stuff, and I think we talked about that, from Huntington Prison, where they confirmed it. And, it'd be interesting to see how his final days, what happened to him in those final days.
Well, listen, Jim, thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for putting Kermit Gosnell in prison.
Yes.
There are a lot of people alive today who
wouldn't be alive if it weren't for you. So it's huge.
So it's huge.
Oh, thank you. And again, it was a team effort. I know I always say that.
Yes, it was. Actually, it was the FBI, the DEA, the District Attorney's Office.
Yeah.
I'm probably missing a few people here.
Ed Cameron, God rest his soul.
Oh, yes. Oh, God rest his soul is right, the prosecutor.
Yeah.
Ed Cameron, who made that amazing speech at the end. We had him played by an actress in the end, but Ed Cameron's speech, where he said he wished that he was thinking about baby boy A, and when the trial was happening, he had the photograph up of baby boy A, and he said, he'd be 4 years old today. I wish to God he could walk in here right now. I remember it so well. He was very emotional, and he had talked about how, in life and in death, people are treated with dignity, and these children had not been treated with any dignity. They'd been treated like trash. We are going to leave it at that for right now. Jim, we are so grateful to you. Always a friend to this podcast and to us forever. We look forward to seeing you the next time for a Guinness in Ireland.
That would be outstanding. I was telling Angela not too long ago.
That has to happen. It has to happen,
Jim. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
You got it. Take care, guys.
So just before we finish the podcast today, I think it's really important for people, if you've managed to watch all of this, and it's very tough, I know some of this is very tough going, we really wanted to end on a happy note. So, and I think this is probably a good place to end. The grand jury also got to hear about one baby, the baby that got away. We called it, the one that got away.
Yes.
And the one child that did survive. And I think it's important maybe to end by having something more positive, that they didn't all die, but this is one child who did escape. So let's listen to that, and we will see you next week.
Yes, that's right. See you next week, and let's have a listen to Anne read from the grand jury report about the baby that escaped Gosnell's evil clutches.
Gosnell began an abortion on a 29-week pregnant woman and then refused to take the dilators out when the woman changed her mind. We learned of another illegal third trimester abortion only because the mother changed her mind. In 2004, a 27-year-old woman went to Gosnell, pregnant with her first child. She testified that she was surprised when Gosnell told her she was 21 weeks pregnant. On the first day of what was to be a 2-day procedure, Gosnell inserted dilators into the woman's cervix. After Gosnell had finished inserting the laminaria, the woman asked him what happened to the babies after they were aborted. She testified that Gosnell told her they were burned. At home, thinking over how Gosnell disposed of the fetuses, the woman had a change of heart. She called her cousin, and the cousin called Gosnell to tell him that they wanted to take the laminaria out. Gosnell said that he could not do that once the procedure has started, and he did not want to return the $1,300 that the patient had already paid. The pregnant woman ended up going to the hospital at the University of Pennsylvania to have the laminaria removed. It was determined at the hospital that she was 29 weeks pregnant. A few days later, the 27-year-old delivered a premature baby girl. She was treated at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia and is today a healthy... Okay, I got a minute now. A few days later, the 27-year-old delivered a premature baby girl. She was treated at the she was treated at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia and is today a healthy kindergartner.